actually talk about what we're going to be doing today. So let me jump
Well, sweet.
into that.
Let's jump into it because I'm super excited about this topic.
All right. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So last week we left off with basically I talked about it briefly, but I didn't show you the code for not animation. Well, animations, new art, pretty art, jumping, and air control. I also talked about briefly how to pair up the keyboard with the simulator so you could use it instead of having to click on the screen when you're testing, so you don't, because you don't have multi-touch, and I'm waving at the screen like you can see me. You don't have multi-touch. Yeah, I do that all the time. So what I really need is a camera, picture-in-picture here, so people can see me waving with my hands and emphasizing. But you don't have multi-touch in the simulator, but you oftentimes need to be able to touch components in your screen, your interface that are far apart. Like, for example, I wanted to touch these buttons, but then jump, and then come back over here and test air control. And it was too much work. I mean, I couldn't just like zipping back and forth with my mouse. So I said, okay, forget it. We'll just hook up those key events and use the keyboard. So that was the tip from probably the number one takeaway tip from last week. Okay, was that me? I'm sure I turned these things. Okay, my devices are going insane over here.
Yeah,
I'm
it
just
must
going to
be.
put them under the desk.
It's just you and me, and I know it's not me.
Oh, nuts. It's very annoying. It's like the thing won't shut up.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've got Windows phones over here and Android tablets and all this other stuff, and there's times where, like, when an Amber Alert goes off, it's like, whoa, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I can't get my devices to just stop making noises when I'm talking. All right. Okay, so this week, now we're getting into the really fun stuff for me. I mean, yeah, all of this has been great. We talked about how to do gravity. We talked about air control. But I've been telling people, sort of pushing off and saying, hey, there's this thing for creating levels and blah, blah, blah. And that's about as much as I described it. And I said, but don't touch it yet, because I may change it. Well, I'm done changing it. And now we're at the point where we can really start kind of just like adding new stuff and create new types of level elements and coins and pickups and spikes and stuff like that. And so today we're going to talk entirely about the level loader, and we'll talk a little bit about the builders. Now the builders, just to be clear, are the little bits of code that will build the elements on the screen, like the monster or the coin or the round platform or the square platform. So I've already gone through this once, but just briefly, the layout of the project is a traditional layout. It's a little bit hard to see here, but you've got your build settings, config, main. You've got a few other files in here. RGCC is the roaming gamer collision calculator, because I don't want to calculate up my own. I don't want to do the math, so I just use a piece of code to calculate the okay, that's definitely not me.
It's okay. Yeah, just
The filters. To calculate up the filter settings for collisions. So that's what I use this for. An icon, because I like to have some kind of icon for these things when I build them. And SSK, which is just being brought along. That's my library, being brought along for the ride to give me things like left and right and some predefined functions that I like to use all the time, like dumping out tables. And then an images folder, where you're going to find all the pretty images under a folder called Kenny. So we got the coin and the various level elements here. And the animations, I didn't show you that. And then a data folder, and that contains the level definitions, which we'll be talking about today. The files that we care most about today will be main, common, game. Let me make these a little bit bigger so we can see them. Level loader, and then some level file definitions that are under the data folder. So let's just walk through it really quick. We have main Lua. So it's got some stuff at the top for getting rid of the status bar, turning on multi-touch when we're actually on a device. We load up SSK to get all the goodness. Load up the roaming gamer calculator, which we're going to use, collision calculator, which we're going to use later. We load the common script, which contains, it's just a module. It contains all kinds of settings for our game. and we start physics, set gravity to 0 because we're going to provide our own gravity, which we talked about previously. And then we simply load the game script and start or create level 1. So if we go into the game script, yes, see, the thing is okay, move on to the next file. So whenever I hear that, I'm going to move on to the next file. So in the game script, basically, it's another module, and it uses the physics library. It requires common because we're going to use some variables out of there. It includes the inputs script, which we talked about on show 1, which basically builds up the, let me find it, builds up the buttons, and handles dispatching the events into the ether, so to speak, for the other objects to listen for. So just on that point, I like to do all of my game designs and pretty much most of my app designs in a way where the objects that are being touched will produce an event that gets thrown out for all the other objects that are in existence to listen for, so that I don't have to have my code connected. So the input code doesn't have to know about the player code, and the player code doesn't really need to know about the input code. All it needs to do is be listening for a runtime event of a certain name and then do something with the data that is attached to that event. So I see Charles is scrunching up his face a little bit there. Doesn't remember this episode, but this is my.
I'm fine.
Okay, good. I'm watching Charles's camera here. That's good. I should watch my own so I know what's going on. All right. So the big bit here is you see a list at the top of Game Lua, and there's a table called Builders, and then in this table, basically what I do is I create a field called Player, Round, Square, and in each one of these, I will store the return value of the require. So I call the require function, and I tell it to load the builder script for the player, the builder script for round, and as we see, I'm definitely not moving on to the next file yet. Although maybe, yeah, that's a good point. Let's do that right now.
I think you know what I think that is. I think that's a chat or something in the background.
Yeah, it could be.
Probably, you probably have a window open someplace that has.
I think either I've got a window open where somebody's trying to chat me, or something. I turn all those things off, but they come back on. So
it's the mystery for the day.
And well, I'm getting a lot of dinging because the show is on, so I'm almost sure that this it's some new thing that they're trying to help us with, where it's hooked up to Google Plus, and I'm getting dings on one of my email clients or something. All right, so scripts. Let's see. I'm sorry. Builders. So just to show you what this is, I'm going to show you the coins builder. So here in game, I've got builders.coins equal to, and then I require the builders, the coins builder. And this file itself is yet another module. They all follow this format where I say load the common scripts at the top, take that return value, and then I have a reference to it. Create a table, just a generic table called builder. And then on builder, I add a create function that takes some arguments, and then I return builder. So what I can do with that is later I could say, if I wanted to, builders, coins, create, and pass some arguments in there, whatever they may be, and that would call the function in this module, coins. Now the reason I did that is because what I wanted to do was put together a very simple way for developing and laying out the levels, which we're going to look at in just a moment. Absolutely driving me batty. Just give me 1 second here.
Trying to hunt down that strange dinging.
Yeah. Well, I got like half a dozen windows open here. Could be anywhere. All right, we're just going to have to live with it. All right, at least it's not pistachios. All right. So, carrying on. We're loading the builder modules, and we're putting them in a table, so we have an easy way to look them up. Still in Game Lua, I have some variables here where I store the rendering layers. We talked about that in episode 1 of this series. So 153, I believe. We have a table, although it's right now just a variable called pieces. Later on, we'll put a table in here where we store all of the references to basically the round pieces and square pieces, which are our platforms in this level or in this game. And I have a variable that I've added recently called current level that keeps track of the current level that we have loaded. We're going to start with level 1. This demo that I will commit today at the end of the show has 2 levels. Then I forward declare 2 functions, one called reload on reload level and the other one called on next level. On reload level, the job of this function is basically to reload the current level and start over. And on next level is basically it will calculate what the current level is, add 1 to it, and if that is not higher than the maximum levels we have, it will load that level. So for example, the first time this was called, it'll go from current level 1 to current level 2, and then it'll reload, it'll just restart the game on level 2. But if it were 3, and our maximum level is 2, then it will go back around to 1, and it'll just loop around. So our logic right now is very simple. We just go level 1, level 2, level 3 until we run out of levels, and then we go back to 1. So that'll change over time, but this is our first pass on level loading. I localize some variables that I use a lot, random, get timer, and pairs. And finally we get into the create. So we've looked at this before. In create, the first thing I do is call destroy on the assumption that I'm going to call this again in the future, and I want to destroy the previous level that was loaded. So the first time you run this, it's not going to do anything useful, but after that it will always destroy all of the content in a game, and then we will rebuild it.